Okay, so at this point, you can probably tell a Wes Anderson movie within like a split second. Everyone is a little quirky, it's all pastels, every shot is perfectly centered. Wes Anderson's new movie, Asteroid City, is out now. Today on the show, is Wes Anderson's aesthetic getting in the way of a good Wes Anderson movie? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, listen, cards on the table. I'm a Wes Anderson guy. His style works for me. The dollhouse aesthetic thing, the quick cuts thing, the bright colors. I'm charmed. I'm charmed every time. It's not even just looks. Honestly, it's like the way that these characters talk and this like silly, self-serious thing that they do. I mean, just take a listen to this scene from his new movie that's out today. This is called Asteroid City.
I hope you're aware you and your accomplices may still face felony prosecution, possibly even a treason charge.
I'll fight it all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary, and win.
This just in from the president.
He's furious. Thanks a lot, Ricky.
I don't know what to say, General Gibson. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize, Dad. The public has a right to the truth.
You made your point.
This tribunal is a mockery!
Right? They're silly, but also self-serious all the time. Listen, joining me now to talk about Wes Anderson and also some of the really big pop culture stories of this week, we got comedian James Mullinger in St. John, New Brunswick, culture critic Amil Niazi in Toronto, and music critic Lindsay Zoladz in Brooklyn. What's up, everybody? What's good? Welcome to the group chat.
Hi.
Hello. James, I'm going to start with you. You just saw Asteroid City last night. You said in an empty theater. Give us a big old quick setup of what it's about. Did it work for you and the whole crowd in that theater?
Absolutely. It was a great atmosphere in there. I have to say, Asteroid City is possibly the most Wes Anderson movie ever. And I guess that's a great thing if you love him, not a great thing if you don't. And like you, I love his work. I adore the formalism. And I love the fact that you can, pause any scene at any point, and that still image could be a photograph in an art gallery. But this was almost so meta that it's almost impossible to summarize. But ostensibly, it's the most star-studded cast ever. And I really, really do mean that. Like Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Edward Norton, Bryan Cranston, descend upon a remote Western meteor crash site for a youth astronomy convention of incredibly gifted teens and their dysfunctional parents. And when a UFO, an alien appear, the town is placed under military quarantine in a kind of nod to COVID. Now, crucially, all of this is played out within a television documentary hosted by Bryan Cranston about the playwright who writes it. I mean, this is it, and it only gets more meta from there.
That's already too meta for me personally. Listen, Lindsay, we got to say the reviews have kind of been mixed on Asteroid City, and a lot of reviewers have noted that, you know what? Yes, he has this voice, he has this aesthetic, it's very notable, but he's kind of getting in the way of his storytelling. What did you think? Did the visuals get in the way of this story?
I think it's the first Wes Anderson movie that's ever confused me, which is saying something.
Yes, yeah.
Even Grand Budapest Hotel, there's a lot of sort of Russian nesting dolls of narrative there, but I felt able to follow it. This one, my first thought was kind of like, I need to see this a second time to really understand, like, formally and conceptually what he's going for. So I do want to see it again, but I think it does get in the way of sort of the heart of this story, because there's a very sweet, sort of like almost Rushmore era, like precocious teen sweetness to the story at the heart that's like in the center of all these meta things. And you just want to spend a little more time with those characters. I think I found it a little hard to care about Edward Norton's playwright, for example, when it was taking time away from being with these really funny kids and seeing them bond in all these interesting ways. So I think to fully grasp it, I need to see it again. But also, like, that shouldn't always be the case with a movie, too.
100%.
I think there are really, like, surface pleasures about it, though, too. It's very funny. I saw it in a much more populated theater than you did, James, and just hearing the laughs really hit. And like, you can, it's not so heady with the framework and everything that there's not like things that you can just get a silly laugh out of. And I appreciated that. So, it is something I'm looking forward to seeing again, but I'm still untangling it in my mind days later.
But to me, that's so interesting, the idea that like you're like, I don't know if I like this movie, but I need to see it again because if it's Wes Anderson, there's something about him that engenders like, you know what? I kind of trust his vision, generally speaking, but this particular time, maybe I need to spend more time with it. Amil, like there's this trend on TikTok where people keep making short Wes Anderson style videos about their work day or whatever, or like their Sunday or their weekend trip. And there's, I think, because he's so beloved as a director and he's got such a distinct style. But Wes Anderson himself says he's never seen a TikTok. He does not want people to send him this trend. He wants them to stop sending him trends of people doing him. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I'm glad he's never seen a TikTok. Like, he shouldn't have to see a TikTok. No one should have to see a TikTok. He kind of likened it to someone doing an impression of you. And even if it's a really good impression, it's not something that you necessarily want or need to see. It's a distillation of who you are, and who you are, like, not the nuances of you. It's like the most stereotyped version of yourself. And so, of course, he doesn't want to participate in that. And I absolutely respect it.
James, at this point, do you have to be a fan of Wes Anderson to like this movie? Or would you go, you know what, you've never seen a Wes Anderson movie. Maybe start with this one.
Well, interesting point, because, I mean, to Emil's point, this movie is kind of like a spoof of a Wes Anderson movie. It's almost like someone has created a TikTok. So, I mean, I think, as ever, the joys are in the details and the little vignettes and the glances through windows and all of those things, and I liked it. And I bathed in it. But I will say this, when I got home, I did have to watch a Bottle Rocket as a palate cleanser because it was just too much. So I guess if you are on the fence about Wes Anderson, you will probably hate this. But if you do like what he does, then this is a very extreme version of what he does. It's essentially Wes Anderson saying, if you like what I do, here's a lot of me.
You have, in fact, completely sold me on it. So I'm going to go do that with my weekend this weekend. Okay, well, we got to talk about the next story because it is Kelly Clarkson Day to those who celebrate, that's me. I am those who celebrate. Kelly Clarkson is back with a brand new album. It's called Chemistry. It's a lot about her relationship to producer Brandon Blackstock and the end of their 7-year marriage. Here's a bit of the, you might call, subtly titled song, I Hate Love, featuring Steve Martin on banjo.
Beat my head against the wall, little by little you took it all. Love's no friend of mine. Counting your blessings on my back, living your best life, living fast. Love, you're out of time. I hate love. I hate love. I hate love.
Lindsay, Kelly has called this album a relationship album rather than a divorce album. How does that story unfold over the record?
So, it kind of is a divorce album. I think we all like to be like, but like, yeah. I Hate Love is the title of the song.
Yes.
So, it unfolds in pieces, I think. When we hear kind of the phrase divorce album, I think you think of this pathos and the however much pain you can wrench out of this, the better. And, we know Kelly Clarkson from a lot of breakup anthems.
Yeah.
She's Since You've Been Gone. I think there's an expectation of that. And something about this record that I find interesting is I think it's the most fun when it's a little more light and playful, like the song we just heard. Yeah. She's having some fun with it. Like, she's got Steve Martin on banjo on the track. We're not getting like an Adele weepy with Steve Martin on the song,
She has a fun line in that song where she says, you can keep gossiping, I'll take Steve Martin, who's of course also playing the banjo on that song. He's having so much fun with it. Yeah, so I'm here for Kelly having fun. And, there are a couple good ballads and more like soul-wrenching moments on the record, but it's not really like an Adele record. I think there's an expectation of Adele's divorce album was like, whoa. This is the capital D divorce album, and this is not quite that. Amil, what about you? How'd you feel about the album?
I love it. I think it's like classic Kelly. Like Lindsay mentioned, she's so good at anthems. And she seems to really be channeling that vibe that Since You've Been Gone, it's like the saddest song you can play at a party, which is absolutely 100% my vibe all the time. And I just like love, you sort of mentioned Elamin off the top before people were listening that you want to hear a country album from her. And I just love her at her most pop. And I feel like this is very, very Kelly Clarkson, top of the pops, and I'm so into it.
Listen, it's a yes and it's a pop album, and also please, Kelly, at a certain point, just like cut 8 country songs because it's time, because that voice would work so well for it. James, Kelly says divorce is this heavy thing to sing about, but she also braces it with these sort of bright pop melodies. There's this kind of like fun kind of contrast there. Does that work for you? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to echo all of you, I totally agree. It's a fun pop album. The songs sound like you've actually heard them a million times before. They're familiar. When she came out and said a few months ago that she considered actually shelving this album because it was so kind of heart wrenching to write. I think we did all expect it to be quite dark. And granted, the lyrics are at point very dark. I mean, as you say, like I hate love and beating my head against the wall and the Notebook lied. The lyrics feel quite dark, but nothing about the music is, and as you say, I mean, I'm sorry, but that Steve Martin on banjo is just the greatest thing. It made me so happy, and I felt like that line that you quoted, you can keep Gosling, I'll take Steve Martin. That is going to overtake Shania Twain's "So You're Brad Pitt." That is now the greatest. I think basically what we've learned from this is divorce is good for music, and just as it is good for lots of things. I mean, right now, I'm 45. Everyone I know seems to be getting divorced. Kelly's 41. Every comedian I know is doing divorce material. Divorce is great for artistry, and more albums need Steve Martin on banjo.
I will say it's been a big divorce moment in music, Lindsay, right? Like over the past few years, we've kind of rewritten the divorce album narrative, right? Like Casey Musgraves has had a beautiful divorce album. There was Adele, Miley Cyrus. For my money, Kelsey Ballerini had the most incredible divorce EP earlier this year. And like, this is a genre that's usually dominated by men, right? We think of sort of maybe like Marvin Gaye or Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen, but it feels like that page is turned, and it is sort of a lot of women are writing incredible divorce albums at this moment. What do you make of this moment?
I mean, I think it's just there are more prominent female artists across every genre in some sense. So it's just, and they're sort of aging into this maturity. Like, I think a lot of these, as much as I said, this is a divorce album, I think a lot of the ones you mentioned too are just like a woman in her 30s and 40s album. And we're now sort of expanding the zone in which we will actually listen to women telling their stories a bit and like letting them grow on the record. And I think that's refreshing. And that's a bit what is behind this seeming boom in the so-called divorce album.
Amil, I mean, I'm really interested in Kelly Clarkson's fame in general, right? Because like for the past couple of years, she's sort of turned an entirely new page in terms of how we know her, right? Like we have the talk show. We also have the Kellyoke, which is just dominating all my YouTube all the time, which is like when Kelly Clarkson performs a cover of a song and she does it so perfectly. How are you thinking about Kelly Clarkson in this moment? It's been about 20 years since she won American Idol. How has she managed to sort of maintain this career and this relevancy, do you think?
I think Kelly Clarkson is America's sweetheart. Like, to me, she is the only true American Idol winner.
Okay, wow. Okay, continue. Sorry.
No disrespect to like
to
Jennifer
Carrie
Hudson
Underwood?
and oh, sure, Carrie Underwood too. Where's she been? But
whoa,
like, we don't have enough time on this show for that. But I really do think that we fell in love with her. She didn't look like a pop star. She's never really looked like a pop star, and then she's embraced it, and she's allowed us to embrace the very different sides of what make her interesting and relevant and unique as an artist. And then I think she's been so vulnerable through this process of from everything from body image to romance, and she's brought us along for the ride. And I just think like everyone has mentioned, millennials are turning 40. They're hitting their divorce era. We've sort of grown up with Kelly. She has been a mirror of our lives. And so to be in this moment with her and for her to bring us into this like very intimate space, I just think it's so reflective of who she is as a pop star and why she's had such lasting relevance.
So you think there's sort of a continuation to you, Amil, of like the thread that she started of like she's been singing these really deeply vulnerable songs from the very beginning. Like I think of the first time just tearing up hearing Because of You and just being like, oh my God, this song will destroy you any day of the week. And then there's this sort of continuation of this thread of the vulnerability. Do you think it's changed in any way, Amil? Like, is there a sense of, I guess there's a sense of maturity here, hey?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you know, I really do think with the talk show, especially, she's entered a different era. And I think that can be a really tricky era. As Lindsay mentioned, we haven't always been super receptive as a society to aging women, to women in their 30s and 40s who are suddenly not, and I'm not saying this personally, but sexually desirable in the same way. And they're not an ingenue. And that can be a very tricky thing to mature into and to extend as far as your career goes. And the fact that she has done that and remained interesting and relevant, I think is really important. And it's showing other pop stars how you can have a long career, how you can embrace all of these different life changes and remain, steadfast in your career. And I think that's a really hard thing to do. And Kelly's showing an amazing example of it.
Well, it is time to move on to the topic that is most stressful to me this week. We're going to move on from Kelly Clarkson to Taylor. And by Taylor, I mean this Taylor.
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. At tea time, everybody agrees. I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror. It must be exhausting, always rooting for the anti-hero.
Taylor Swift is on her Eras tour in the U.S. right now. She just released a schedule for her international tour. It goes through August next year to Europe, Asia, South America, but fans right here in this country, right here in Canada, were kind of left in the cold when they realized there's no shows have been scheduled here yet. We've talked about this before. I am like a radio host on the side. I am professionally a Swiftie. That is what I do for a living. That's what I get up every day. I'm like, okay, let's go to work. And by that I mean go to the Swiftie Twitter minds. That's what we're about. So I'm feeling some type of way about the fact that this tour is not coming to this country. There's all kinds of rumors about why it's not coming to this country. That's a whole conversation. But maybe let's contextualize it, Lindsay, with you're in the U.S. You went to one of Taylor's shows this year. What are Canadian Swifties missing out on?
I mean, not to give you all some mass FOMO here,
yeah, go off.
I mean, it's a really impressive show. It is a show of stamina, first of all. She's playing for over 3 hours. I had to sit down by the end. I needed a little breather at some of the last songs. But it's also, it's a celebration of her whole career, the longevity of her career. But she's also released 4 albums now since she's toured last. So she has this incredible backlog of material that fans haven't gotten to see live yet, whether it was the pandemic albums she released, Folklore and Evermore, she's had Midnight since then, even Lover she never got to tour on. So there's just a lot of pent up demand for this new Taylor material and to see how she realizes it live. And, it was pretty spectacular. I'm not going to lie.
You don't need to lie. Also, I don't want to be disingenuous. I have seen the Eras tour. I went to the Chicago show maybe like 2.5 weeks ago. And like Lindsay, by the time that we got to the midnight section of the show, which Taylor at that point had been on stage for 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I was like, you win. I don't have the stamina. I need to sit for just a moment. You have defeated me. If that was your point, you made your point loud and clear. It's an incredible show. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes, 16 costume changes. And honestly, all of them collectively take less time than like one Beyonce costume change. Like it were just all so rapid and just genuinely incredible. I don't want to make people feel worse. Maybe James, I'll ask you, have you ever been disappointed when your favorite artist didn't come to your city? Is that a thing that happens a lot?
Well, I mean, living on the East Coast, we just get used to the fact that we have to travel for shows. So, I mean, here it doesn't feel like as much of a snub. Also, I guess crucially, she hasn't completely ruled out Canada. It's not like she said, I hate Canada, I'm not coming. It just hasn't been announced yet. So I think we can sit tight. But I mean, I do know the feeling. I mean, when I was 11 years old, I begged my parents for tickets to go and see Guns N' Roses because they were coming to my town for the first time. And they said, we'll get you the next best thing. And I opened the envelope and it was Cliff Richard and the Shadows. And I was like, this is not the next best. This is not it. And here we are, many years later. I'm now 45. I still haven't seen Guns N' Roses. And suddenly I discover that they are only doing 3 dates in Canada. And one of them, inexplicably, is here in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Wow.
So what I'm trying to say is to people, dreams can come true. and Moncton, I mean, who would have thought in a million years Guns N' Roses are coming to New Brunswick? I guess someone here did a great job promoting the fact that we have this ginormous space that is big enough to hold their fan base.
Yeah.
And crucially, Amil, you will be delighted to know that opening up for Guns N' Roses here in Moncton is Carrie Underwood. That's what she's been doing.
Hey!
Whoa.
That's the wildest combination of a show I've ever heard.
That's huge. I love it.
James, I'm coming to Moncton. Let's go. I'm absolutely ready for this. Amil, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. Yesterday, I was spending a bit of time being like, do I want to fly to a different country to see the Eras Tour again? Should I go to Sweden? Should I be going to Switzerland? Should I be going to, Germany? I'm trying to figure this out. Where are you on this? Are you researching other nations in order to attend the Eras Tour? The laugh is so telling. Go off.
You already know that I'm not a Swiftie.
I know.
I'm sad for you, genuinely. I think it's sad when people really want to see someone, but like I am never like, oh man, I can't go to a stadium and like line up for hours, not be able to get in, and then not be able to sit for a while. And then if I want to get like a hot dog or something, I have to wait in another line. I can't pee for 4 hours. Oh my God, it's going to be a crazy rush to get home. That's never me. Like I'll never be sad to miss a stadium show. And that's just a fact.
Amil Niazi is not missing it. I am missing it. All right, before we move on, I just want to say it's time for you guys to give me some kind of recommendation. What should I read? What should I watch? What should I do with my weekend? Lindsay, you want to start?
Sure. So not to continue the concert FOMO here, but I did see The Cure last night on their current tour, and it was amazing.
Oh, man.
Highly recommend going to this tour if you can. I know they're like in the middle of it, but if you can't, the next best thing is listening to Disintegration once again and just crying. Like that's my weekend recommendation for you.
That's what I'm going to have to choose because they just came to Toronto a few days ago and I missed it, and now I'm mad at myself. I'm mad at myself, but I'll fly. I'll fly. James, I'm coming to Moncton. I'm coming to St. John. That's what we're going to do. Maybe The Cure will be there. James, what do you want to recommend?
I'd like to recommend 2 amazing rappers here in New Brunswick. A better reason to come to New Brunswick, possibly, than even Guns N' Roses.
Let's go.
Wolf Castle. Wolf Castle is one of the most exciting rappers, I think, working in the country today. Based in Pabonneau First Nation, tours all over. And also Michael J. Fox. That's Michael J. Fox with 2 X's at the end of his name, I should emphasize. He's from New York, but moved to Moncton, New Brunswick about 5 years ago, and has been taking the hip-hop scene by storm here in Atlanta, Canada, and indeed across the country. So come to New Brunswick and see Wolf Castle and Michael J. Fox.
I'm moving in with you, pal. Let's go. Amil, last word to you.
I want to recommend a book called It Girl by Ruth Ware. If you're looking for like a beachy sort of thriller, true crime, this is it. It's about a woman whose roommate at Oxford is mysteriously murdered, and it's a kind of a before and after. So if I can't watch true crime, the next best thing is reading it.
I'm sold. That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for these recommendations, and thanks to each of you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Amil Niazi is a culture critic in Toronto and does a column at The Cut. James Mullinger is a comedian in St. John, New Brunswick. Lindsay Zoladz is a music critic in Brooklyn. You can catch her review of Kelly Clarkson's album at the New York Times. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and you're listening to Commotion. Listen, I gotta tell you, Sheila Rogers was my introduction to CBC Radio. I remember driving around with my dad, listening to her voice. It is truly and genuinely just the warmest voice in radio. So I don't know how I feel about Sheila Rogers signing off this weekend after more than 4 decades on the air. For the past 15 years, Sheila's hosted The Next Chapter. During that time, she sat down with so many incredible Canadian authors, often at the start of their writing careers, including Cherie Dimaline. Cherie's first book, The Mayor of Thieves, became a massive hit, international bestseller, and she became a regular on the show over the years. She spoke with Sheila Rogers earlier this year about her latest book, Venco.
And when we first meet Lucky, she sees herself as stuck in sort of a nothing life. She's in a rut. She's in a dead-end temp job. She really, really wants to be a writer. But she's had this awful experience of having an English teacher tell her to sort of manage her expectations. And, you know, he says, you're good, but so am I. And if I can't get a book deal, you sure as hell won't. And I just have to ask you, did that ever happen to you?
All the time. And in fact, Sheila, with my kids, I remember being in parent-teacher interviews for my children and them saying, well, your daughter, she wants to have a career. Who knows what it was at that time? They change all the time, but in music. And I think we really need to manage her expectations, which then, of course, just pulled my ire to the front. Like, no, we need to support her in her dreams.
Yes.
It's why you don't need a plan B if you're all in on plan A. And yes, it might not turn out, but you'll end up somewhere that isn't where you are now.
Cherie Dimaline speaking with CBC's Sheila Rogers earlier this year on The Next Chapter. Sheila is saying goodbye to CBC after 43 years. Her last episode as the host of The Next Chapter airs tomorrow. And earlier this week, I told you about another colleague in CBC Books who's also retiring this weekend. Eleanor Wachtel's last episode as host of Writers and Company is on Sunday. Congratulations again to both. And that is it for the show. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I hope you had a good time. I hope you had a good time hanging out with us. Listen, we're going to be here next week. I hope that you're going to be here next week. And then you know what? We get to do this all over again. See you then.